Hello, hello, hello. This is Marshall Goldsmith. Very happy to be joining you on LinkedIn Live today with my great friend Srikumar Rao. We're going to have another guest today. Dr. Raj wasn't able to join us because he's having homeschooling with the kids, and so many internet connections at once kind of prohibited him from being online. And again, we didn't want the kids to be unschooled today. So I'm here with my great friend Srikumar. Let me briefly introduce myself to those of you I haven't met, and we'll get started. My name is Marshall. I'm from a small town called Valley Station, Kentucky. Went to school in Indiana, got a PhD at UCLA, was college professor and dean. And then after that, I did three things. I traveled around the world teaching classes and giving talks about leadership, and I got ranked #1 leadership thinker. Then I was an executive coach. I've coached the CEO of Ford and Pfizer and Glaxo and a lot of the top leaders around the world. And I love that because I learned so much. And then I write books and articles. I've written or edited 41 books, 3 bestsellers. And then anything else about me, I went to a program called Design the Life You Love. And a woman asked me, who are your heroes? My heroes were kind and generous people who were great teachers. And she said, why don't you be more like them? So I said, that's a good idea. So I decided to adopt 15 people, teach them all I know for free. And the only price is when they get old, they have to do the same thing. Well, I made a little selfie video and put it on LinkedIn. Turned out I had the biggest selling video in the history of LinkedIn. And I had 18,000 people apply to be adopted. So now we have a program called the 100 Coach Program with 250 amazing people. And one of these amazing people is Srikumar Rao, who's with us today. And as Srikumar talks, I'm going to ask you all to make questions and write the questions in the chat room. And Justin is going to listen to these questions and get back to us with some of them to the degree we can. And let me briefly introduce Srikumar. Then Srikumar, you introduce yourself and we'll get rolling. Srikumar is a great guy. He's probably one of the best teachers, especially business school teachers in the whole world. He's taught the most popular classes ever at Columbia, at Berkeley, business schools in London. He's an amazing, amazing man, a very good thinker and a great, great teacher. I'm very honored to know him. So Srikumar, just introduce yourself for a couple of minutes and we'll get rolling.
Okay, thank you, Marshall. So what I actually did is I took the teachings of the world's greatest masters, stripped them of religious, cultural, and other connotations, and adapted them into exercises that are acceptable and appropriate for intelligent people in the post-industrial society. So when I created my course, I stated in the syllabus that this course will profoundly change your life. And if it doesn't, we've both failed. And actually, it does change lives because it isn't my stuff that I'm sharing. It's the teachings of the world's greatest masters. So that's what I do. And I am honored to be the vehicle of transmission. What I'm about to share in my programs and what I'm about to share today isn't stuff that I came up with. These are the teachings of the world's great masters. They've been tested over millennia and they work.
I love the concept. I love the idea. And I've got some good questions for you to begin with.
Shoot.
So I love this question. How can you avoid stress by using a flashlight?
That is a wonderful question. So let me throw it back at you. What does a flashlight do, Marshall? A flashlight illuminates whatever you shine it on. Okay, so you
Yes.
got a flashlight, you shine it on the desk, it lights up the desk. You shine it on the floor, it lights up the floor. Your awareness is like a flashlight, it lights up whatever you shine it on. And what we're very busy right now is shining it on all kinds of things that might happen, particularly in this coronavirus days. What's going to have happen
Mm.
to my job? I might lose my job. So you shine your flashlight of awareness on that. Or you shine it on what's happening outside. Will we ever get back to the way we were? And it lights that up. So I've got a suggestion. Don't shine the flashlight of your awareness on what could happen, which is essentially a story that you're manufacturing. Shine the flashlight of your awareness on what can I do now? And be ruthless in that. So if you keep shining the flashlight of your awareness on what can I do now instead of, oh my God, what could happen, you'll find that it's not that fearsome a time after all.
That's a great example. Let me give you an analogy I'm going to use in my next book. It's playing golf. I'm not an all golfer, but in terms of playing golf, one thing great golfers understand is hit the shot in front of you. Don't get lost in the shot that came before was good or bad. Don't get lost in winning the trophy. Really hitting that shot that's in front of you and concentrating on that moment and shine a light on that. So it's a very, very great metaphor. The next one is I love this question. How can you mention various different philosophical views of the world? Sufis. How can you use a Sufi tale to give us some ideas on how to deal with the coronavirus?
Oh, absolutely. This is a tale which resonates deeply with many, many persons. I'll tell it to you very briefly. There was a man and his son who lived in a beautiful valley, and they were very happy, but they were also very poor. And the man decided he
Yes,
was sick and tired of being poor, and he was going to become rich by breeding
yes.
horses. So he bought a stallion, didn't have enough money to buy a stallion, borrowed heavily from the neighbors. And the very day he got a stallion, it kicked the top bar loose from the paddock where he housed it and disappeared. So the neighbors came around saying, you were going to become a rich man, but your stallion has run away and you still owe us money. You are in a deep hole. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? That stallion fell in with a group of wild horses which were close to where he was living, and he was able to entice them into the paddock which he had repaired, so escape was no longer possible. So now he had the stallion back plus a dozen wild horses, which by the standards of that village made him a wealthy man. And the neighbors said, we thought you were destitute, but fortune has smiled upon you. How lucky you are. And he shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? The man and his son started to break the horses so they could sell them on the market. And one of the horses threw the man's son and stomped on his leg, and it broke and it healed crooked. And the neighbors came around and said, oh, he was such a handsome young lad, and now he'll never be able to find a girl to marry him. How unfortunate. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? That summer, the king of the country declared war on the neighboring country, and press gangs moved through the villages, rounding up all the able bodied young men to serve in the army. But this man's son was spared because he had a game leg. And the neighbors had tears in their eyes, and they came around and said, we don't know if we'll ever see our sons alive again, but you still have your son. How fortunate you are. And he shrugged his shoulders and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? And it goes on like that forever. But there's a very important lesson in there, Marshall. And I'm inviting you to think of it. Can you recall any time when something happened in the past that at the time it happened, you thought this is terrible? But you can now look back
Yeah,
upon it and say, hey, that wasn't so terrible. It was actually pretty good. I'm sure you can recall a whole bunch of things. So
oh, definitely.
if something happened in the past in your life that at the time it happened you thought was terrible, but you can now look back upon it and say it was great, is it just barely possible that what you're today about to say is terrible, like you're locked up in your home in coronavirus days? Is there any possibility? Is there any scenario that you can construct in which this could turn out to be a good thing? Even asking that question will move you to a different emotional domain. And if you then ask yourself the next question, is there anything I can do to actually make it a good thing? And all of a sudden, you move from the realm of despair to the realm of possibility. Because understand, suffering doesn't happen when any event occurs. Suffering only happens when you label that event, this is bad, this is terrible, I cannot bear it. Why are you in a hurry to label something as bad when you don't really know if in X years it will be bad? Learn to
Srikumar,
live in possibility.
that's a fantastic example. In my own life, I look back on perhaps many of the things that happened to me that were seeming failures at the time, which turned out to really be important, tragic things maybe that turned out to be positive. I got cut from the high school football team. I was devastated. I felt so sad. And then finally I woke up and realized, why was I trying out for the high school football team anyway? I'm a smart guy. I'm a crappy athlete. Who am I kidding here? Best thing that ever happened to me. Surfing.
Exactly.
I I broke my neck surfing, right? And then I thought, oh, I broke my neck. It's very bad. If I could ever walk again, I'd be so grateful and happy. Once I could walk, I was so grateful and happy to walk. I went to Africa. There's a picture of my book Triggers, and I was surrounded by people starving to death. And I said, God, this is awful, but I keep the picture every day to remind myself, be grateful for all you have. So I do think we're going to look back on this moment, and I love the way you're talking about it. Is what are we going to get out of this? And I just today I was on a call with people from many pharmaceutical companies. We could break a record in new immunities. We could break a
Yep.
record of getting drugs to market. All kinds of innovation is coming out of this. So again, a great way to look at life. Now, a lot of
And let's not
people
forget
tell
one
me,
thing, Marshall. I do want to stress that I am seeing so many examples of people reaching out to see what they can do to contribute. I have never seen such a flood of caring erupt spontaneously all over the world.
I agree. I agree. That's nice. I get a lot of questions from people saying, I'm having trouble sleeping at night. Any ideas to help them?
Absolutely. Uh, what happens, Marshall, is we've got a very unfortunate tendency to shine the flashlight of our awareness on the two, three, or four things that are wrong in our lives. More precisely, on
Uh,
the two, three, or four things that we have arbitrarily decided are wrong in our lives. That's completely arbitrary. And we
hmm,
ignore the 40, 50, 200 things which are pretty damn good about our lives. So I'm
hmm.
saying flip this around. Before you go to bed, consciously bring to mind the many ways in which you are not just fortunate, but incredibly privileged. And think about that. Now, if you're a type A individual who lives in your head, and I'm sure many of the people who are listening to this or viewing this program are type A individuals who live in their heads, there is a tendency to think gratitude rather than feel gratitude. So you can't go good health, check, food to eat, check, roof overhead, check. It doesn't work like that. Instead, bring those things to mind and feel gratitude for them rather than thinking gratitude. And if you do that, you will probably fall asleep before you have time to complete the exercise. When you get up in the morning, don't go immediately to the space of, oh my God, there's so much to do and I don't have enough time to do it all. Bring that feeling of gratitude back. And many times during the day. In fact, it's my earnest hope that all of the people listening to this program or viewing it will eventually come to the point where their default emotional domain is that of appreciation and gratitude. And I'd also like to add one other point. When you're being appreciative and grateful, just be appreciative and grateful. Because don't be grateful for something, because whatever you're grateful for can be taken away from you. So just be grateful. Don't be grateful for anything. Does that make sense,
Very good.
Marshall?
Yes, I like it. Now, you in working with your clients, you encourage people to be something called a civil engineer. And I went to engineering school, but what do you mean by civil engineer?
All right, it's this way, Marshall. Let's assume I'm a county executive and you are a civil engineer. And I call you into my office and I want a road built from place A to place B. And where the road has to be built, there is a mountain, a forest, and a swamp. Do you get angry at the mountain, the forest, and the swamp? Of course not. There's the terrain you're given, and your skill as a civil engineer lies in how are you going to get the road built? Do you have to go over it, under it, through it, or around it, right? And if it turns out that the mountain is made of granite and the swamp is really deep, you might think in terms of jacking up the fee. But apart from that, it has no impact on you. You don't get angry at them, right, Marshall? In exactly the same way, you are the architect, the engineer of building the road to your fulfilled life of meaning and purpose. You are the civil engineer of your life. And all the problem people you meet and all of the unexpected events like the coronavirus are the mountains, the forests, and the swamp. You don't get angry at them. You figure out how you're going to get your road built despite this. That's the terrain you've been given. So anytime you find yourself getting angry at someone, anytime you find yourself getting overwhelmed, simply ask yourself, am I being a civil engineer? And have that as your model. They are who they are. They are the forest, the mountains, and the swamp. You are the civil engineer. Get the darn road built. Don't rail against them. Don't get angry. Don't make them an excuse. Your skill as a civil engineer is how are you going to get the road built to your meaningful, purposeful existence? So
I
that's
love
what I
that. I
mean
love
by
that.
being a civil engineer.
I love that metaphor. Now, and everybody be thinking of questions, please. And next one I want to ask you though, a lot of people right now are worried. A lot of people right now are afraid.
Yeah.
What advice do you have to help these people?
The advice most people give, Marshall, frankly doesn't work. It's no good going up to a person who's afraid and saying, "Oh, don't be afraid," because
Right.
bad things are happening. People are losing jobs, careers are crashing, companies are going bankrupt. So it's no good saying, "Don't feel afraid," because if I could not feel afraid, I would darn well not be afraid. But what you can do is the following: you cannot tell someone not to be afraid, where you can tell someone to be aware that they are afraid. It is possible to examine your mental chatter, which is running amok, and step aside from it and become the witness of that. So you cannot not be afraid, but you can step aside and observe that you are afraid, and you can anchor yourself in the witness stage. This is easy to do. It's very difficult to maintain because you step aside and you are the witness, and 5 seconds later, you're back to being a scared, individual. But if you persist in standing back, if you persist in being the witness and you observe that you are afraid, you will find that fear gradually leaves you. And if you then combine it with what I spoke about earlier, use the flashlight of your awareness on what can I do as opposed to what
Hmm.
could happen, you'll find that you're much better able to cope with this situation. And in fact, most of the other vicissitudes that you're going to run across.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a very, very, very good point. One of the great gurus I listened to once said that fear is not permanent. Fear never lasts. Fear always passes. Even if you're in a war and bombs are dropping around you every 5 minutes, after a day or a certain time period, you become acclimated to it. And, you don't like it, but it just becomes your life. You can't live in a state of permanent fear, even if you try. So, Srikumar, as you said, what is the fear? Identify it, look at it, and realize it will pass. It will pass. And the more you hold on to it, the longer it's going to stick around. And just being able to look at it and say, I am afraid. I am afraid of this. You can't stay afraid, even if you try. So, fear, it's impossible to stay in a permanent state of fear, no matter how hideous the situation is. This too will pass. Now, Justin,
Yep.
you've been getting some questions. Do we have any good questions for my great friend Srikumar?
Yeah, we sure do. First one comes from Parachi Randawa. And question is, what are the top 3 things you can do to keep reinventing yourself and stay future ready?
Okay. I would say you ought to begin by cultivating the default emotional domain of appreciation and gratitude. Because when you're in the default emotional domain of appreciation and gratitude, you're not anxious, you're not worried, you're not angry. The two cannot coexist. The second thing that I would like persons to know is that we think we live in a real world. We don't. We live in a construct. And we manufacture this construct with the mental chatter we entertain and the mental models that we hold. We're all living in the matrix. But this matrix wasn't created by an alien civilization out to enslave us. We created it with our mental chatter and the mental models we hold. So, and this actually is very liberating because what I'm saying is we don't live in the real world, we live in a real world. And if you live in a real world, there is hope. You don't like some part of it, you can deconstruct it and build it up again. And this is a process that you're going to do over and over again for the rest of your life. So that's number two. And the third thing, which is actually closely allied to what I just said, is recognize that whatever happens to you is simply an event. It is neither good nor bad. These are the labels we stick on it. And I invite you, don't stick the bad thing label in particular. Just say, this happened. And then you turn it around and say, how can I engineer what just happened to help get me to where I want to be? And if you do that, you will find that very little, if anything, in the world ever has the capacity to phase you. Don't spend your life resisting what is. Accept what it is and use it as a tool. And I'm going to throw in a bonus. I would like everyone to consider that the only thing you ever do in life is you work on yourself. You're given a number of tools, your wife, your business, your career, and all of these are tools that you use. And the more skillfully you use it, the better you will be. But in the process of using these tools skillfully, what you're really doing is working on yourself. And that's the only thing you ever do in life.
Very good. Very good. You know, Srikumar, I just was on a webinar and someone said, if your house burned down and you had a chance to rebuild it, would it be just like the one that burned down? And the answer is no. You'd make changes. Well,
Yes,
sometimes your house burns down as an opportunity. You have an opportunity to build a
absolutely.
new
That's a
house.
good one. Yes.
You have to better house, a different house, but you don't have
Yeah.
to stay in the same house. So a great, great metaphor again. Next question, Justin. We'll have about two more.
Yes, Marshall.
Okay.
In the light of looking at the positive side of something in the sense of the fire of the home and how the outlook on that, Vabiv Parikh asks, how can I help people focus on the positives over the negatives? And what are the steps for moving to a negative zone to a positive zone?
Okay. First of all, I would encourage people to not think in terms of positive or negative, because whether you think in terms of positive or negative, whenever you do that, you're stuck in polarity, you're stuck in duality. And the idea is to move beyond all duality. So don't get hung up on, I'm in the negative zone and I want to move in a positive zone. Just say, this happened. And how can I use what happened to help take me to where I would like to go? And when you do that, you find that you're never stuck in a downward spiral because you're using everything that happens as it's grist for the mill. And you carry on.
That's wonderful. Now, next question, Justin.
Okay, this one comes from Jagdish Singh, and he actually called you out, Marshall. He said, hey, Marshall, but I think both of you could answer this. It'd be interesting to get your perspective.
Sure.
Says, how does one navigate around people who are exceptionally toxic, people who influence and affect various states in your life? In other words, work, family, social, etc.
Sure. Well, my first suggestion is send me an email, marshall@marshallgoldsmith.com. Marshall has two L's. I wrote an article called Influencing Decision Makers. And this is about how to deal with people who may not be who you want them to be, but deal with them as they are, as Srikumar said. It's a very similar philosophical point of view. I learned this from Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker said our mission in life is to make a positive difference, not to prove we're smart and not to prove we're right. We get so lost in proving how smart we are and right we are, we forget we're not here on earth to do that. We're here to make a positive difference. If I don't make a positive difference, it doesn't matter how smart I am, it doesn't matter how right I am. Second, every decision in the world is made by the person who has the power to make the decision. Make peace with that. Not the best person, the right person, a fair person, or a good person. Whoever has the power to make the decision is going to make the decision. Next thing I learned from Peter Drucker is if I need to influence you and you're the decision maker, there's one word to describe you, it's called customer. One word to describe me is called salesperson. As Srikumar said, you sell what you can sell. You change what you can change. You make peace with what you cannot sell. You make peace with what you cannot change. And in an organization, if you can change the decision maker, fine. If you can make a positive difference, fine. If it looks hopeless, look for another job. Don't cut off your nose to spite your face. Don't look for another job until you've got something better to do. On the other hand, really realize my mission is to make a positive difference, as Srikumar said, not to sit there and focus on other people's problems. And I like the way Srikumar said about the civil engineer. It is what it is. It is what it is, what it is. And so you basically say, this person is in my life for whatever reason. How can I make the best of this situation that exists, as opposed to judging the person and getting angry about the person? Just focus on that. Srikumar, just not so much for this question, but just one final word for the group, for the people listening. What would be your final thought for everyone listening?
My final thought would be, please recognize that you have created the world you live in. And having created the world you live in, you experience it as you have created it. If you're unhappy with your situation right now, you have the power to deconstruct parts of it and build it up again. And this is something that you do over and over and over again. If people are interested in how to go about doing this, I have a book called Are You Ready to Succeed, in which I detail that. And I'd be very happy to answer any questions if anybody has. And my email is simply my name, srikumarsrao@gmail.com. And if anybody wants to reach me, they can reach me there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Srikumar. You've been a great friend of mine for many, many years. I'm very honored. You're one of our 100 coaches. I'd say one of the great teachers. Not only do I say this, your students would say one of the great teachers in the world. So honored to have you join us today. Thank you very much. And my life is better because I've known you. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marshall. And I must add that I first met you when you came to speak to my class at Columbia, and you've spoken to my class at London, you've spoken to my class at Haas in Berkeley, and it's just been super getting to know you, because guess what? I've read your books and I learned so much out of that I have unabashedly stolen many of your ideas, and I am acknowledging that I have. Thank you.
In my new book, I'm sure I'm going to steal a couple of your ideas. And you know what? I have a good heart. I would give you credit, yet I have a bad memory. I'm sure I won't even remember it. So if you do read your ideas in my book and I don't recognize you, it's not that I mean poorly. It's just I can't remember where ideas came from anyway.
You're forgiven in advance, Marshall.
Thank you. Namaste. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So everybody, thank you.